She has 3 objectives. She wants to tell us who she aspires to be as a teacher, how she's going to maximize her internship next semester at Bermudian Springs, under the direction of Ms. Diane Jurema, and what opportunities she's had to get her to where she is today. Again, she will have 30 minutes. We'll then follow into a 15-minute Q&A session, of which I'll ask the audience, the teacher panel, and then the online audience that we have for individual questions. So be thinking of questions to ask Ms. Liszka across the time before we get there. I would ask that you silence all your cell phones so that we can be respectful for the time that we have. We will ask after the Q&A session for a closed door session so we can talk with Kaitlin individually. With me here today, the teacher education panel is Dr. John Ewing, Dr. Daniel Foster, Ms. Beth Matthew, Mr. John Seaman, and our doctoral candidate, Ms. Tiffany Morey, will be running all of our tech and all of our questions on the Zoom audience and the Facebook Live audience that we have with us. With that, Kaitlin, if you would like to introduce any of the loved ones that you have here in attendance or those that are here to support you, and then you would like to introduce yourself, your time will start. Thank you.
Do I have to introduce people?
You don't have to introduce everyone. Maybe
Okay.
And no one if you don't want to introduce, miss anybody. That's totally fine.
Just your loved ones, not here.
Okay. Yeah, I have a lot of friends that are like family. That's my introduction to the whole audience. Okay. So my name is Kaitlin Liszka, as Dr. Curry said, and I just want to thank everyone for coming tonight. I know that we could think of a lot of things that we would rather do at 5 p.m. than listen to me talk. But before we really dive into the presentation, I wanted to let you know a little bit about who I am. And so this first picture here is very special to me because all the people in this picture are part of my Ag Ed family, but they are also part of my church family, and my faith has been very influential in my entire life in all the decisions that I have made, including the different questions that we will get to today. And so a little bit more of my background that I will touch on as we go through the presentation. I am not born and raised in FFA, but I am born and raised in 4-H, and there is a picture of me with my lovely market steer. I also raised market hogs and sheep. In high school, I was very busy. I was a 3-season athlete where I played basketball, ran cross country and track, and was very actively involved in band and choir. After I graduated from high school, I went to The Ohio State University, where I majored in livestock science and specialized in beef cattle, and this is a picture from my graduation. And after that, before I came to Penn State, I took a gap year where I joined the Pennsylvania Army National Guard as a water treatment specialist, and this top picture is a picture of me getting wet from the hose doing my job. And then this bottom picture is of me and my cohort here at Penn State. And so today, like Dr. Curry said, we're going to talk about who I aspire to be as a teacher, how I'm prepared to maximize my student teaching internship, and what experiential education opportunities I've engaged in to make me a better agricultural educator. And so kind of going back a little bit, like I said, I studied livestock science at The Ohio State University, and here I am also minoring in international agriculture, which has shaped a lot of my experiences. Some courses that I have really enjoyed taking and that have prepared me for my student teaching are AEE 349 and 350. For those of you that aren't aware, those are our ag mechanics courses. Ag mechanics is something that I've always had a lot of interest in, but I've never really known how to do any of the things, and so I think that Dr. Ewing can attest that my levels at least have gone up dramatically because I started with basically nothing. I'm still not to where I want to be, but I'm getting there. I took a course for my international agriculture minor that was Women's Studies 420. It was about women in developing countries, and I really liked the content that we covered, but I also really appreciated the class because I liked the facilitation style of the professor, who was Dr. Kathy Sexsmith. I thought that she did a really good job of balancing how she lectured to give us material and how she did discussions. And then also in TAG 490, which was my capstone course for my international agriculture minor, and something that was really influential in that class was that we had to do a grant proposal, and writing grants is something that I will definitely be doing as an agriculture educator, and it gave me a good foundation to start with that. And then when I was at Ohio State, I took most of my agriculture classes there, and I took Farm 1, which I basically just went out to the farm and worked with beef cattle, and Beef 2, which took me on a trip to California so that I could learn about agriculture across the United States. And then some of the extra things that I've been involved in, I'm not going to go too comprehensive on this list because I could probably stand here and talk all day about the extra things that I have done. I attended the Pennsylvania Association of Agriculture Educators Summer Conference. I went to the national conference just a couple weeks ago. I participated in SAE for All. I went to Ohio State FFA Convention, and I've been a participant in the Global Learning in Agriculture Conference with much of the behind-the-scenes work as the Global Teach Ag intern, which also took me to the World Food Prize, which this is a picture from the World Food Prize where I was lucky enough to work with educators that have been teaching for a while that are from across the United States, but we're also in a bunch of different disciplines, and from that I really got to see different ways that you can do some cross-curricular connections that I would like to bring into my classroom. And then some certifications that I have. This big long fancy acronym is basically just for a safe tractor driving. I have my beef quality assurance. I am certified to artificially inseminate your cattle. I'm not sure that I would ask me to do that if you would like a high pregnancy rate, but I am certified to do it. And through the National Guard, I am Stop the Bleed and Hazmat certified. Some connections that I have had through my life that have brought me to this place here. I worked at a small family zoo called Pymatuning Deer Park, and while I was there, I was my first real interactions with the public not really having a lot of clue about agriculture, and I had to learn how to respond nicely when I was asked for the 15th time in an hour why the pigs didn't have water, but they actually had an automatic waterer. And then before I even came to Penn State, I worked for AmeriCorps, where I got to design curriculum for kids that lived in low-income housing areas in my county and co-teach it with the other members of AmeriCorps, and that was really fun because I was able to bring my side of agriculture and show them some applied STEM. And then I was the Global Teach Ag intern, which has shaped so much of my journey here at Penn State. I've had that position from the time that I got here, and I could probably give you an entire hour's worth of presentation of things that I have learned, but I have learned a lot of professional skills. It was the first time that I really facilitated workshops and things like that, and it also took me to Ag Ed Malaysia, which I will save that and talk about it a little bit later. And so all of these things wrapped up together bring me to my teaching philosophy, and in your packets, if you want to look at it, you can see my infographic on the first page, and then if you would like to read more in depth about the things that I am saying, you can read my philosophy statement. And basically, I think that for a good program, everything has to be a cycle. And so I have my community, my students, and my agriculture education program, which is also where I would place my agriculture educator, and they're all working together in a cyclical fashion. But I have my community down here supporting the program, because without the community support, you're just going to fall. You need the community to be there to help assist you. It's a really big job to do all the things in an agriculture education program, and it's too much for you to do alone. So they're holding up our program, and our program is sprinkling SAE, classroom instruction, and FFA into our students so that they can grow not only in their content knowledge, but their soft skills, those 21st century skills that employers are looking for, and in their leadership skills. And so part of my philosophy is how I will manage my classroom. And so I have different expectations, procedures, and consequences for my students. And so some of the things that I expect from my students is really that they come on time, that they do what they're asked, and that they clean up after themselves. And then I also expect things from my students. Timeliness is very important to me. I think that the Army has instilled that in me, and honestly, if you show up on time, sometimes I struggle a little bit with thinking that you're not late. And then another one to point out is respect. If I was to make this poster over again, I would move respect to the top, because I think that if students are respecting their classmates, themselves, and me as the educator, that a lot of these other things will fall in line. And then I also want my students to be in a space where they're having fun. And then for my consequences, I think that a lot of times the word consequence gets a negative connotation, and I don't think that that is something that necessarily has to be true. And I would like to create a culture in my philosophy and with my students that consequences can be a good thing. Yes, if you don't meet my expectations, I might have to call home to your parents because you're hindering other people in the class and you're hindering your own learning. But if you're doing a really good job of meeting my expectations, there's no reason that I can't give you a positive consequence and also call home and tell your parents what an awesome job that you're doing. And so also to make sure that I have a safe space and a place where everyone can learn, it's important that I'm able to handle diversity in my classroom and encourage it so that everyone can learn from each other. And two places that I have really gained a lot of knowledge and skills in handling diversity is at my time at Advanced Individual Training for the Army and when I was in Malaysia. When you look at these pictures, you see people that look very different, but what you can't see is that we all come from very different backgrounds as well, especially in this picture. I think that I was the only one that didn't live in a suburb or a city, and I was in charge of making sure that everyone in my class was doing the right thing, that they showed up at the right time, that they had the right uniform on. And I had to learn how to communicate to them, and I quickly learned that sometimes the things that I said that I meant well with saying came off with a very harsh connotation to them because of cultural differences of the way that we talk. And so I had to learn to adjust my languaging so that I was getting my message across and not creating barriers of just a simple task that didn't have to be something that blew up into something big. And then in the second picture was my trip to Malaysia, which I mentioned earlier. And this picture, I think, was the second time that I stepped in front of a group of high schoolers in my life to teach them. And so in that class, I was the one that was the international student, and that was really weird to realize when we got there that, oh, like I'm studying internationally just like the international students that I see. And so one of the barriers there was that I didn't speak the same first language that they did. And so it gave me skills and more empathy for my English as a second language students to be able to understand a little bit more of what they're going through and adapt my instruction to help them be able to understand the content in our classes. And then moving into my model program, which is greatly influenced by my philosophy. While I was at NAAE a couple weeks ago, I went to this really awesome workshop with Mary that was called Finding the Sweet Spot of Ag Ed. And so the Ag Ed talks a lot about this three-circle model that includes classroom instruction, FFA leadership, and supervised agricultural experience. And this model might even be a little gracious in how much room they show in that overlap in the middle. And the presenter said that if you look at the traditional model that we see, that would be about 8% of your instruction that is an overlap between all three in this organization that's supposed to be intercurricular and combining everything together. And so he said that he likes to look at his model more like this, where the circles are pushed in and that this middle part grows so that it looks more like a 68% of overlap. And one of the examples that he gave that I really liked and would like to somehow implement in my ideal program someday is that there was a class that this teacher had for his ag mechanics, and he was struggling to get his students to be interested in the content. And so he asked the students to go out into their community, because it was a very tight-knit community, and find things that they wanted to be able to do to help others. And one thing that they came back with was that they wanted to build a porch for a neighbor whose porch had fallen in that she normally sat on. And so the teacher was able to grab a hold of that opportunity and get his students not only interested in the classroom content by making that neighbor a porch, but by also integrating FFA by having the students plan a service day for the chapter to go build that porch for her. So even though not all the students were able to have a chance to go on Saturday to build the porch, they were still involved in FFA by being part of planning during class time. And there's no reason that that couldn't become a foundational SAE for a student who might be interested into looking into carpentry or something along those lines. And so also in my model program, which if you turn to the back of my handout, you can see this closer, I would and this is always evolving. I even had some thoughts the other day after I made this of other cool things that I would like to add, but I decided that I needed to limit myself. And so I would start off with an AF&R class, and because I think that that covers a lot of basics of agriculture and natural resources that would be a good foundation for any of the other pathways. And then I would have an animal science pathway, a plant science pathway, and an ag mechanics pathway. And one of the cool things that's not on here that I thought of the other day was how I think it would be really interesting to have an ag engineering part of your mechanics pathway, where students could come to the ag classroom and have an intro to engineering where they learn skills like welding and other ag mechanics related things that are in engineering, and then they could go to an engineering theory course where they would talk to and learn from a teacher who was had more content knowledge in engineering, and then they could come back to the ag classroom and do applied engineering and get to really take what they learned in the last two classes and kind of design even the syllabus and the projects that they got to work on themselves. And so another really cool idea that I had for mechanics came while I was making my ag mechanics project. So for this project, I do have a step-by-step instruction to get everything exactly to how I want. But I think that it would be really cool to give the students a budget and tell them how much all of the items cost and let them roll with the different things like horseshoes, rebar, screws, and see what they could come up with. I was able to design this for just a little under $15, and I will pass it around so you guys can examine my welds closer. And also, going off my ideal program, if I could dream really big and have all the money in the world, I would design a really big animal science facility, which is in the very back of your packet if you want to see that closer. I think it could be really beneficial for the community and the class if you had something that was very heavy on vet tech, animal science, those sorts of things. There's places for cattle, sheep, hogs, a feed storage room, a handling chute, a wash rack. You could do a lot of different things with learning how to give injections, learning farm management, nutritional feed. You could do a lot of different trials and research within the nutrition in this facility. But facilities like this aren't something that just come about by themselves, and so having community support is really important. You could use the facilities to bring your community in to help you either teach or coach a livestock judging team. You could allow them to have events. You could let them bring their own animals in to let your students be able to help treat them if they are sick. You could let them process the animals, things like that. And so just having your community there beside you is really important. But also you're not just going to build something like that overnight, and so you need to be also reaching out to your community and letting them know what you're doing so that you can have the funds to help your students do the really cool things that you want them to do. So this is a program recruitment video that I made with two of my other classmates that is recruiting stakeholders to help invest in your community. And so I'm just going to play a few seconds of it.
After high school, I'd like to go to college and study wildlife management and conservation or environmental biology.
Post high school plans is to go to Penn State for food science, biomedical science, and veterinary, sustainable agriculture and quality, military.
Villanova to major in civil engineering or architecture.
And so I think that it's really powerful that when you're trying to get support from the community that you're using the voices of your students. I know that was kind of hard to hear, but the students were saying the different careers that they would like to take, and they weren't all going to college. Some of them were going straight into the workforce, or some of them wanted to join the military. But I think that having that extra buy-in from your students, telling your community members, hey, this is what FFA and my ag program is taking me, but we need your help to get there. And so, taking all of these things in my philosophy, I will be headed to Bermudian Springs High School in just a few short weeks, and I'm really excited about it. I will be teaching with Miss Diana Dreama, who has been there for a number of years, and with Miss Cheyenne Weevil, who is new to the program, and so I'm super excited to get to work with her and build those relationships. They have 2 greenhouses, an agriculture mechanics shop, a dry lab, and 2 agri-science classrooms that I will be utilizing while I'm there. And when I look at their program and kind of examine the different areas, I think that they do really well in their teacher certification area. Both teachers came through Penn State's program and have a strong foundational knowledge of the different aspects of an agriculture education program. And they offer a wide variety of classes that allow the students to meet their instructional times in order to be considered a completer of an agriculture education program. For those of you that aren't familiar, a quick synopsis is that you have to take so many credits of specific courses to be able to be considered a completer, to then be able to cycle back to the state to be able to get more funding. And then some areas of improvement is that they could work a little bit more with their guidance office to be able to communicate the type of classes and the academic rigor from their classes. And I think that that will greatly improve as Cheyenne is now there and helping to move that program and make some changes. And I'm excited to see how that goes. So this is a snippet of my daily schedule if I am on a regular scheduled day, which I will be for most of the days. And the students get there around 7:40 and leave about 2:50, but I know that that is not the schedule that I will have. I know that I will be there earlier and will be spending nights later just working on being prepared for the next day or for helping out with FFA events after school. Bermudian will be at ACES, and they will also go to the State Leadership Conference, and it'll be my first time at the State Leadership Conference, so I'm really excited for that. And they also host a banquet that I unfortunately will not be able to attend because of other Penn State obligations. And then this is a quick snippet of the units that I will be teaching. If you look in your packet, I have it a little more detailed with the bell schedule. And I also have all of my units organized in my binders over here to help me teach them on a daily basis, because I am more of a paper person than an electronic person, and so I need to be able to hold the piece of paper. Some units that I'm really excited for are my global unit. I'm excited to take the things that I've learned through my Global Teach Ag internship and be able to mold them and pass that on to students. I'm also really excited for both of my ag mechanics shops because my content knowledge is still not the highest in those areas, and so I'm excited to be able to work with the students and possibly even learn a little bit from them so that I have more confidence in those areas. And of course my animal science course, because animal science is my baby, and that is what I am always really passionate and excited to talk about. And so some strengths and weaknesses that I see myself bringing to the table. If you look at the list, a lot of them are doubled because I feel like they're a double-edged sword. So I can be a perfectionist, which is really good when you want someone who's paying attention to detail, but it is not always good whenever you need someone who is willing to let go of the reins a little bit and let other people, including your students, do some of the work and be okay with it. Something that I have seen myself grown in a lot, even just this past semester. But I think that overall, I would consider it more of a strength because of how it keeps me detail-oriented and helps keep me organized. I also have a tendency to be very honest. I say that if you don't want my opinion, you probably shouldn't ask. And so that's good because you know what I'm thinking, but sometimes people are not in the state of mind to actually hear what I am thinking, and so I have to learn to balance that out a little bit and maybe feel out before I let things leave my mouth all the time. I also am a hard worker. I am constantly moving, but I think that sometimes I forget to delegate, and I could make my life a little bit easier and contribute more to my work-life balance. I also went to a workshop on that at NAAE that was really insightful and helpful to see that I'm not the only one that struggles with this, and give some maybe little practicals to help me learn to let go of the reins a little bit. And I think that ties back into my perfectionism. But all in all, I'm able to make sure that I get the work done. And so I think that that will be very beneficial when it comes to my student teaching. And looking back at some of the theories that we've talked about in some of our courses and the characteristics of a teacher, I think that I can internalize business-like well for a good characteristic. I can be very serious, sometimes maybe a little too serious, which puts me back into a weakness that I can improve upon, which is my enthusiasm. I can be really excited about a topic, and you might not have any idea because I let my business-like front take over my enthusiasm. And so some goals that I have for my student teaching, I would like to improve my confidence, not only in my teaching abilities, but also in my knowledge of just how an agriculture education program works. I've been told a lot in the past couple weeks that I know a lot more about FFA and SIE than I like to let myself think that I know. And so I'm really hoping that my time at student teaching will confirm that those people are right, and that I have more confidence in my ability to run an effective agriculture education program. I also would just like more clarity on agricultural education as a whole. That kind of ties back into the confidence, but also my goal is to figure out if I think that teaching is somewhere that I want to start out in agriculture education, or if I would like to take a different support role coming out of college. And some other more pedagogical goals that I have are with giving directions, making sure that what I think I'm saying is actually what the student is hearing, and that they are able to complete the task that I would actually like them to complete, and to be more effective with my questioning, to get better at asking those questions that work into the higher levels of thinking. And so thank you all for coming and listening to my presentation. Before we formally move into questions, I just wanted to say that if anyone doesn't get to ask a question or is afraid to ask a question in front of the group, I welcome you to come talk to me afterwards, or you can reach out to me in another way, and I'd love to talk to you.
So again, we're going to float between the panel as well as the audience and the online audience. So we would like to field a question from the group in front of us. Those of you in the audience, I'd love a question from you guys first.
Don't be shy.
I'm happy to.
Okay.
Kaitlin, I really appreciate that you have planned a global section coming up in your ag business module. I was just wondering, how did you make the choice to separate the global? Because I think, like, you and I have had this conversation many times, like the difference between separating it out versus global being integrated into everything that we do, trying to demonstrate it's not something extra, it's just a part of what we do. So can we talk about that?
So to be entirely honest, that was a course that is getting a little bit of an overhaul, and so I know that Mr. Rima is really passionate about Global 2 and has struggled to find ways to incorporate it, and so we made the decision to make it a unit so that we were finding a way to like incorporate it into a class, and since they're working on redoing it, it was an easy fit. But I do plan and hope to still incorporate Global into my other units as well.
I want to tag along with that question. As someone who's done so much work in that area, I have to ask you, for those who don't know, Kaitlin helped design the first ever GLAG Junior program last year. So what are the learning outcomes that you're hoping for in that 3 weeks? You got 20 random freshmen or whatever coming in there. What grade level?
Seniors.
Okay, 20 seniors from Bermudian Springs. Rolling in, you got 3 weeks with them. What's one or two things you hope to achieve in 3 weeks?
One thing that I really hope to achieve is that they understand that their community is bigger than just their back door, and so that they can see global competency as something that's important, and that the world way beyond even the United States still impacts them at home. And so even if they don't plan to leave the community, it's something that they should still care about.
Good.
All right.
Online audience.
So we have two from the online audience. I can ask both of them, or we'll
Sure.
come back. Your first question comes from Opie McCubbin, and Opie wants to know, what role do you think technology should play in the agricultural education program?
So I think that there is definitely a lot of roles that it can play, and I think that it depends on the students that you have and the classroom that you have. But I think that one way that it can be really beneficial is that you can bring things from outside your world into your community without a lot of extra expense. So one way I hope to use technology is to use the Skype in the classroom and bring in a guest speaker from somewhere else to talk about ag business to my students. And so that's something that you could do easily in a lot of other classes, even to like tag on to your question, Melanie. You could utilize technology to help integrate global things into your curriculum, and I think that's one way that I think that I specifically will use it because of my passion for global learning.
Bet you Dr. McCubbins could even get Dr. Roger Hanniger at AET to connect with you and talk about ag business.
Take our second from the online.
All right,
audience.
this is from Victoria Brown, who's a member of PSU Ag Ed 19, and she's now an ag teacher at Kutztown High School. She says, great job, Kaitlin. I agree that truly embracing the three-circle model in a program can be tough. In your time at Bermudian, what ways will you try to incorporate all three circles into the program more?
So that is a really good question, Victoria. So I honestly haven't put as much thought into this as I probably should have, but looking at my greenhouse course, we are planning on right now doing some hanging baskets in the spring for our sale, and so some ways that I can see that playing out with incorporating all three models is pulling some parts of the floral design CDE maybe into the classroom to help design that instruction and give students exposure to it, and then to allow some students to also potentially take some extra time and work in the greenhouse to be part of their SAE. The fundraiser at the end is also for FFA, and so just the students' time spent in class to help plan that fundraiser is also a way that FFA can be brought more into that circle for all students.
And Opie said that your answer to his question was great, and you can make the world smaller by leveraging technology in the program.
Kaitlin, I'll ask a question. Can you tell me something specific about your military background that will bring something specific about your military background that will translate well into the classroom as a teacher?
Yeah. So there are a lot of things that I see parallel as you look at the military and being in a classroom as a teacher, and just the model in FFA of trying to grow leadership. They spend a lot of time working through structures and rank systems to make sure that you have leadership skills that you need to lead those underneath you. This summer I'm supposed to be going to my basic leadership course so that I can be promoted, and I'm excited to see the things that I can pull from there to bring in. But I think that the time that I spent at basic combat training, I was a bay leader and a platoon leader, and at advanced individual training I was a class leader, and I think that that time just being in front of all of my peers and keeping everything logistically organized is something that I can bring with me, because the students will also need some of that same sort of guidance to help them.
I can kind of piggyback off that question. You're obviously a very driven, motivated, hardworking individual. How do you, or what plans do you have to overcome challenges that might arise with working with perhaps a lot less motivated, hardworking students?
Yeah, so that's something that I think about, and that's something that I'm a little bit concerned about sometimes when I think about being in the classroom, because I can't tell them to just do push-ups when they don't do what I ask them to do. And so I think that the best answer that I have figured out in my mind at this point is trying to find things that interest them and get to make that relationship with them, to get to know them a little bit more on a personal level, just as a person. And I think that once you do that, you can gain respect from your students, and whenever students have respect for you, I feel like they're more likely to want to do work for you and not disappoint you.
Kaitlin, I want to commend you on a job well done. It was a very good job. My question, first off, I want to thank you for addressing diversity. You're in my current course for diversity in the workplace. So I want to ask you how you'll foster cultural diversity in your classrooms.
Yeah. So I think that sometimes it can seem like it's a daunting task, because you're like, how am I supposed to bring different cultures in? I don't get to pick the students that live in my school district. But I think that when you just look at students' backgrounds, like not everyone in your school district is going to live in town necessarily. Not everyone's going to live out in the middle of nowhere. There's normally a little bit of a mix. Or they have family that's a little bit of a mix, or even just their ethnicity. So just because I'm white and someone else is white, maybe we came from a different part of Europe. And so finding ways to like tap into those differences and just like the cultural differences of the way that you were raised, and making sure that students know that it's okay that you don't look like everyone else, and encouraging them to be themselves and bring those different things to the table.
So I'm going to take a little different approach with my question this time. I'm very intrigued. It appears you might be teaching about small gasoline engines at some point.
Maybe just a few units, yeah, like 4.
Now you're well prepared for that. So I'd like you to just share a little bit. It says you have a couple weeks of troubleshooting as part of that.
Yes,
How do you see that playing out, and what type of instruction have you designed for troubleshooting, or what are you thinking you're going to do there?
So for my troubleshooting unit, I have it designed after they have taken their engine apart and put it back together and learned about the systems. And so it's my understanding that they're going to have engines that don't necessarily run. And so taking the time to go back to that engine that they put back together and just working through the problem solving and using the manual to help to be able to figure out what the problem is that's keeping their engine from running.
Thank you.
I have a question for you. Like, you've been a center employee for a while. What are some of the skills that you've acquired while being a center employee that you'll take with you into your teaching experience, and how will you make those connections with the program?
Yeah, so I've gained a lot of skills. I think that one of them that has been very useful is I feel like I've gotten very good at sending professional emails. And so when you're communicating with administrators, when you're communicating with parents, when you're communicating with stakeholders, you need to be able to know proper ways of communication. And so emailing is one of them, but I've also learned how to be better and more confident at making phone calls when needed, to be able to get the things that you need because people don't turn their presentations in on time, or to communicate without being able to see them face to face. I think that also through the working at the center, I've learned how to network a lot better. While I'm sitting in the office, I don't necessarily get to meet a whole lot of different teachers, but I have still got to learn a lot about their lives and their programs. And then whenever I do actually get to meet them face to face, it has made it easier to like sit down and start to have that conversation. And so I think that the networking skills that I've gained just by being there has been super beneficial as well.
Kaitlin, why does this cohort better because you're in it?
Because I'm awesome. No. I think that the cohort has benefited maybe from the fact that I'm a little bit older, and so I have had a little more time to figure out how to not let the little things stress me out as much that have to deal with assignments. And so I feel like I was able to be there to be a little more level-headed as we went through, but I also did have times where I was stressed out and they were able to be level-headed for me. I think that also too the fact that I came from a different university and I came from a different background from ag ed brought a different twist and a different concept of how maybe an ag ed program should even look like, that we were then able to take all of our different ideas and spin them off of each other to make our own type of philosophies for teaching.
Thank you, Caitlin.
We found a really good use of the poop emoji.
Yeah.
What was that university?
Yeah, make sure.
All right, Caitlin. we have a scenario. You ready, Caitlin?
Yeah.
All right, here's a scenario. Small high school, 550 students, Apple program with every student having a MacBook, long extinguished program, one teacher with 8 years of experience, another teacher with 4 years of experience. We're looking to add a third teacher. Why should we hire you?
Well, I think that because I came from a high school that kind of sounds like that, except for not the ag ed part, I would be able to relate to the students and be able to know more ways to be able to connect with the community a little bit faster maybe than another teacher. And the fact that I am a new teacher, I would bring a new set of eyes with a new idea to help revamp it. You didn't give me content for the other teachers, so I guess content's not really that important anyway, because you can teach yourself the content as you go. But I think that they could hire me because of really just the different spin of the way that I think that I look at a traditional ag ed model compared to a lot of other people.
We require a student question. We have not heard one.
Required, no one leaves until it's done.
Good.
So you talked a lot about your global experiences, and that's obviously important to you. I'm not sure like where Bermudian Springs is located, but I'm sure there's a lot of local community support. How do you explain to the community and get them to understand why their child, their son or daughter taking an agriculture class, it's important for them to learn about global agriculture and not just local Pennsylvania agriculture?
Yeah, I think that that can be hard sometimes when you're looking at older populations because they like to be stuck in their ways. But I think that once they realize that I'm not saying, hey, your son or daughter needs to like go to Africa to learn about global agriculture, they can stay here and learn about it, and explaining to them even in the community, a lot of people are going to understand a little bit about international markets, not even just in agriculture, but like in trade in general, because they're often in the news. And so I think that using that and the things that they can connect with, and then being like, this is why I want to teach this in my classroom, and this is why it's important for your students to know this, is how you can overcome some of those barriers.
Thank you so much. Will you help me in thanking Kaitlin for